Single dad millionaire. Heard the maid whisper, "Not today." Years later, he understood. Before we start, leave a comment and tell us what city are you watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy! The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as Elena Rodriguez knelt beside the antique mahogany desk, carefully dusting each carved detail. The silence in the vast library was broken only by her gentle humming and the distant sound of rain against the tall windows. She had no idea that behind the partially open door, someone was listening. "Not today," she whispered softly to herself, shaking her head as she glanced at the framed photograph on the desk. The image showed a stern-looking man in an expensive suit standing beside a small boy with sad eyes. "Not today," she repeated, her voice carrying a weight that seemed far too heavy for such simple words. Marcus Blackwood froze in the doorway, his hand still reaching for the door handle. He had come to retrieve an important contract from his private study, but something about the young woman's whispered words made him pause. There was pain in her voice, a vulnerability that seemed out of place in his perfectly controlled world. Elena continued her work, unaware of his presence. At 26, she moved with quiet grace, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, revealing the elegant curve of her neck. She wore the standard gray uniform of the housekeeping staff, but somehow she made even that look dignified. Marcus found himself studying her profile, noting the determined set of her jaw, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she worked. "Not today," she said again, this time more firmly, as if strengthening her resolve against some invisible adversary. Marcus stepped back, his expensive Italian shoes silent on the carpet. He had built a billion-dollar empire by reading people, by understanding their motivations and desires. But this woman, this maid who had worked in his house for 3 months, remained a complete mystery to him. The next morning, Marcus sat in his home office, pretending to review quarterly reports while actually watching Elena through the security monitors. She moved through his house like a ghost, efficient and nearly invisible. But now he noticed things he had missed before. The way she paused at family photographs, her expression softening. How she straightened his son's drawings that hung on the refrigerator, though she had no reason to enter the kitchen during her assigned cleaning hours. The careful attention she paid to 7-year-old Tommy's room, ensuring every toy was perfectly placed. "Sir?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your ex-wife is on line 1. She says it's about Tommy." Marcus grimaced, switching off the monitors. Victoria's calls were never pleasant, especially when they concerned their son. She had made it clear during the divorce that she wanted nothing to do with the burden of raising a child, preferring her new life in Paris with her artist boyfriend. "What is it, Victoria?" he answered, his tone clipped and professional. "Darling, I need you to understand that I won't be taking Tommy for Christmas this year. Pierre has planned this wonderful exhibition in Barcelona, and a child would simply—" Her voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the familiar weight of disappointment settle in his chest. Not disappointment in Victoria. He had given up expecting anything from her years ago. But disappointment for his son, who still held on to hope that his mother might actually want him. "Fine," he said simply. "Tommy and I will make our own plans." After ending the call, Marcus found himself walking through the house aimlessly. He had everything money could buy: a penthouse in Manhattan, a house in the Hamptons, cars that cost more than most people's homes. But lately, the silence in his own house felt suffocating. Tommy was at school, The staff moved through their duties like well-oiled machines, and, sadly, Marcus realized he had never felt more alone. He found Elena in the sunroom, carefully tending to the orchids that his interior designer had placed there for aesthetic purposes. No one had told her to care for the plants, but somehow she had taken it upon herself to keep them alive. "They're beautiful," he said, startling her. Elena turned quickly, nearly dropping the small watering can. "Mr. Blackwood." I'm sorry, I didn't hear you come in. I can finish this later if you need the room." "No, please, continue." Marcus moved closer, surprised, genuinely curious. "I have to admit, I never expected anyone to actually take care of these. The decorator said they were decorative elements." A small smile played at the corners of Elena's lips. "Everything alive deserves care, don't you think? Even if it's just decorative." Something in her tone made Marcus study her face more carefully. There was a sadness there, carefully hidden but unmistakable once you knew how to look for it. He found himself wanting to understand what had put that expression in her dark eyes. "Elena," he began, then paused, realizing he had never actually spoken her name before. "How do you like working here?" She looked surprised by the question. In 3 months, this was the longest conversation they had ever had. "It's a beautiful home, Mr. Blackwood. You're very fortunate." "But that's not what I asked." Elena set down the watering can, considering her words carefully. "It's quiet," she said finally. "Peaceful. Sometimes quiet is exactly what a person needs." Before Marcus could respond, the front door burst open with the energy that only a 7-year-old could generate. Tommy bounded into the house, his school backpack sliding off his shoulder, his cheeks red from the October cold. "Dad! Dad! Guess what happened at school today?" Tommy's excitement was infectious, and Marcus felt his expression soften as it always did when his son was around. "Let me guess," Marcus said, catching Tommy as the boy launched himself forward for a hug. "You convinced Mrs. Peterson to let you feed the class hamster again?" "Even better! We're doing a project about families, and I get to interview someone about what makes a family special. Will you help me?" Marcus felt his smile falter slightly. Tommy's innocent enthusiasm about family projects always reminded him of everything his son was missing. A mother who cared, siblings to play with, the kind of warm, chaotic family life that Marcus had never experienced himself. "Of course, buddy, we'll work on it together." As Marcus lifted Tommy for another hug, he caught Elena watching them from the doorway of the sunroom. The expression on her face was so tender, so full of longing, that it took his breath away. For just a moment, her careful composure slipped, and he saw something raw and vulnerable in her eyes. Then Tommy noticed Elena and wriggled out of his father's arms. "Elena, did you see my drawing from art class? I left it on the kitchen counter." Elena's face transformed, lighting up with genuine warmth. "I did see it, Tommy. The dragon you drew was magnificent, very fierce and brave, just like you." Tommy beamed, clearly delighted by her praise. "Do you want to see my room? Dad got me new books about space." Marcus watched in amazement as his usually reserved son grabbed Elena's hand and began pulling her toward the stairs. Elena looked uncertain, glancing at Marcus for permission. "Go ahead," Marcus said softly. "I think Tommy would love to show off his collection." As he watched them climb the stairs together, Tommy chattering excitedly while Elena listened with complete attention, Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. There was something about the way Elena interacted with his son, something that went beyond professional courtesy. She genuinely cared about Tommy, and Tommy, who was usually shy around the household staff, seemed completely comfortable with her. Later that evening, after Tommy had gone to bed, Marcus found himself in his study, staring at the contract he was supposed to be reviewing, but unable to focus on the words. His conversation with Elena kept replaying in his mind, along with that moment when she had watched him with Tommy. There had been such longing in her expression, as if she were witnessing something she desperately wanted but knew she could never have. He was startled from his thoughts by a soft knock on the door. "Come in." Elena appeared in the doorway, hesitating. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Blackwood. I wanted to apologize if I overstepped earlier. With Tommy, I mean. I know it's not my place to." "Elena?" Marcus stood up, moving around his desk. "You have nothing to apologize for. Tommy clearly enjoys your company, and I appreciate how kind you are to him." Elena nodded. "But she still looked uncomfortable. I should go. It's late, and I have an early morning." She turned to leave, but Marcus found himself speaking before he could think better of it. "Elena, wait." She paused, looking back at him. "Those words you said yesterday, in the library, not today. What did you mean?" The color drained from Elena's face, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might flee. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. "Sometimes, Mr. Blackwood, we all have days when we have to remind ourselves to keep going, to not give in to the sadness. Not today means today I choose to be strong." Her voice was steady, but Marcus could see the effort it took. "Today I choose to believe that things can get better." Before Marcus could respond, Elena had slipped out the door, leaving him alone with more questions than answers. But one thing was certain. Elena Rodriguez was far more than just a maid, and Marcus Blackwood was beginning to realize that his perfectly ordered world was about to become much more complicated. The next morning, Elena arrived at the mansion earlier than usual, her hands trembling slightly as she unlocked the service entrance. She had barely slept, replaying every moment of their conversation, every look Marcus had given her. The memory of his fingers brushing hers when he handed her the teacup made her heart race all over again. She moved through her morning routine mechanically, dusting furniture and organizing rooms while her mind wandered. When she reached Marcus's study, she found a note on his desk. "Thank you for last night. Your words meant more than you know. M." Elena clutched the note to her chest, feeling a dangerous warmth spreading through her. This was exactly what she couldn't allow to happen. She was an employee, nothing more. Marcus was grieving, vulnerable, and she was taking advantage of that vulnerability by letting herself feel these things. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her quickly fold the note and slip it into her apron pocket. Marcus appeared in the doorway, dressed for work but looking uncertain. "Elena, I wanted to—" He stopped, running a hand through his dark hair. "About last night, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." "It's fine, Mr. Thornfield," she said, not meeting his eyes as she continued dusting his bookshelf. "You were upset. It's understandable." "That's just it," he said, stepping closer. "I wasn't just upset. I meant what I said about not wanting to be alone anymore, and I meant it when I said you're not just staff to me." Elena's hand stilled on the leather-bound book she was cleaning. "Mr. Thornfield, please don't." "Marcus," he corrected gently. "Just Marcus." She turned to face him, her dark eyes conflicted. "This isn't appropriate. I work for you. There are boundaries that shouldn't be crossed." Marcus studied her face, seeing the war between her feelings and her principles. What if those boundaries are getting in the way of something real? Before Elena could respond, the sound of a car pulling up the circular drive interrupted them. Through the large windows, they could see a sleek black sedan approaching the mansion. "Are you expecting someone?" Elena asked, grateful for the distraction. Marcus frowned, checking his watch. "Not until this afternoon." He moved to the window, his expression darkening as he recognized the figure stepping out of the car. "It's Victoria!" Elena had heard the name whispered among the other household staff. Victoria Blackwell, Marcus's late wife's sister, had been vocal about her disapproval of how Marcus was raising Tommy. She believed the boy needed structure, discipline, and most importantly, should be attending boarding school rather than being homeschooled. "I should go," Elena said quickly, moving toward the door. "No," Marcus said firmly. "Stay, please." The front doorbell chimed, and within moments they could hear Victoria's authoritative voice echoing through the foyer as she spoke with Mrs. Henderson. Her heels clicked sharply on the marble floor as she approached the study. Victoria Blackwell swept into the room like a storm cloud. Tall and elegant, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, she commanded attention wherever she went. Her eyes immediately fixed on Elena with obvious disapproval. "Marcus, darling," she said, air-kissing his cheeks while never taking her eyes off Elena. "I see you still have the help lingering about during business hours." "Elena is not the help," Marcus said coolly. "She's Tommy's teacher and a valued member of this household." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. "How progressive of you." She turned to Elena with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Would you mind giving us some privacy? I need to discuss family matters with my brother-in-law." Elena looked at Marcus, who gave her a subtle nod. "Of course," she said quietly, gathering her cleaning supplies. As Elena moved toward the door, Victoria's voice stopped her. "Actually, wait, this concerns you as well." She opened her designer handbag and withdrew a manila folder. "I've been doing some research into Tommy's educational situation." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Victoria, we've discussed this." "Yes, and I've respected your wishes for over a year," Victoria replied, opening the folder. "But Tommy is falling behind his peers. He needs proper socialization, structured learning, and frankly, someone more qualified than," she gestures dismissively at Elena, "a housekeeper playing teacher." "I have my teaching credentials," she said quietly but firmly. Victoria laughed, a sound like ice cracking. "From some community college in Mexico, I'm sure." "Tommy needs preparation for the best schools, the best universities. He needs connections, networking opportunities. He needs Ashford Preparatory. He needs stability and love," Marcus said, his voice dangerously low. "Things he gets here, with Elena." "Love?" Victoria's eyes glittered with malice. Her gaze flicked between Marcus and Elena meaningfully. "How convenient that his teacher also happens to be a young, attractive woman living under your roof." Elena's face burned with shame and anger. "I would never." "Of course you wouldn't," Victoria said with false sympathy. "I'm sure you're a perfectly nice girl. But appearances matter, Marcus. What will people think when they see you living alone with a young Mexican maid?" "Elena is not a maid," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Semantics," Victoria waved dismissively. "The point is, this arrangement is inappropriate and harmful to Tommy's development, which is why I've taken the liberty of arranging an interview at Ashford for next week." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "You had no right." "I had every right," Victoria shot back. Someone needs to think about that boy's future since you're clearly too distracted to do so properly. Her eyes fixed on Elena again. By young women who have inserted themselves into positions they're not qualified for. Elena felt her chest tighten with a mixture of rage and humiliation. Everything she had feared was happening. Her presence in this house was being twisted into something sordid, and worst of all, it was affecting Tommy's life. Perhaps, Elena said quietly, surprising them both. Mrs. Blackwell is right. Marcus spun to face her, shock written across his features. Elena, no. Maybe Tommy would benefit from a more traditional educational environment, she continued, each word feeling like a knife in her chest. With classmates his own age, proper facilities. Don't you dare let her get to you, Marcus said urgently. Tommy is thriving with you. He's happy. He's learning. He's healing. Is he? Victoria interjected smoothly. Or is he simply becoming too attached to someone who won't be in his life forever? Someone who, let's be honest, is completely outside his social circle and always will be. The words hit Elena like physical blows. She thought of Tommy's bright smile that morning when she'd helped him with his math problems, the way he'd hugged her tight and asked if she would teach him to make empanadas like his mama used to make. She thought of his nightmares and how he only seemed to calm down when she sat by his bedside and sang soft Spanish lullabies. Elena, Marcus said desperately, don't listen to her. She doesn't understand what you mean to us. Victoria sensed weakness and pressed her advantage. I've also had some interesting conversations with the other staff members, she said, pulling out several sheets of paper. It seems there have been quite a few late-night visits to Marcus's study, private conversations, shared meals, very cozy indeed. Elena's face went white. She realized that every innocent moment, every conversation, every attempt to help Marcus through his grief had been observed and recorded by someone in the household. Someone who had been reporting back to Victoria. Mrs. Henderson mentioned that you've been seen coming from the master suite wing early in the morning, Victoria continued relentlessly. Taking breakfast to Marcus personally rather than having it sent up with the other staff. Spending evenings in the family areas rather than the servants' quarters where you belong. That's enough, Marcus roared, but Victoria wasn't finished. And there's the matter of your immigration status, she said, playing her final card. It would be such a shame if INS decided to take a closer look at your work authorization. These things can be so complicated, especially when there are questions about the appropriateness of your position here. Elena felt the room spinning around her. The threat was clear and devastating. Not only was Victoria attacking her professionally and personally, but she was threatening the very foundation of Elena's life in America. Without her work visa, she would have to return to Mexico, leaving Tommy behind and destroying any chance she might have had with Marcus. You can't be serious, Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. I'm very serious, Victoria replied. This situation ends now, one way or another. Either Elena removes herself from this inappropriate position, or I will ensure she's removed through other means. The choice is yours. Elena looked at Marcus, seeing the rage and helplessness warring in his expression. She realized that Victoria had backed them into a corner with surgical precision. If Elena stayed, she would bring scandal and legal trouble down on the family she had come to love. If she left, she would break Tommy's heart and abandon Marcus when he needed her most. But there was really only one choice she could make. I'll tender my resignation, Elena said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "Elena, no!" Marcus stepped toward her, but she backed away. "It's better this way," she said, looking directly at Victoria. "For everyone." Victoria smiled triumphantly. "How wise of you. I'll have references prepared, of course. Glowing ones. You'll find another position easily, I'm sure. Perhaps with a family more suitable to your background." Elena nodded curtly and moved toward the door, but Marcus caught her arm gently. "This isn't over," he said quietly, his eyes boring into hers. Elena looked at him for a long moment, memorizing every detail of his face. "Yes," she whispered, "it is." She walked out of the study with her head held high, leaving behind the two people who would determine her future. As she climbed the stairs to her room to pack, she could hear raised voices from below as Marcus and Victoria continued their argument. Elena sat heavily on her narrow bed, finally allowing the tears to fall. In trying to protect herself from heartbreak, she had walked straight into it. But worse than her own pain was the knowledge that she was about to break Tommy's heart too. A soft knock on her door made her quickly wipe her eyes. "Come in!" Tommy peeked his head around the door, his face bright with excitement. "Elena, I finished my science project early. Want to see?" Elena's heart shattered as she looked at his eager face, knowing she would have to find a way to explain why she was leaving him too. Marcus found himself checking his watch obsessively, counting the minutes until Elena would arrive each morning. 3 months had passed since their first dinner, and what started as professional courtesy had evolved into something that made his chest tight with anticipation. He'd catch himself listening for her footsteps, the soft humming she did while working, the gentle way she spoke to Sophie during breakfast. "Daddy, why do you smile so much when Elena's here?" Sophie asked one morning, catching him off guard as he watched Elena arrange flowers she'd brought from her garden. "Do I?" he deflected. But Sophie's knowing 8-year-old grin told him he wasn't fooling anyone. Elena glanced over, her cheeks flushing pink. "Your father is just happy, mi amor. That's good, no?" The way she called Sophie "my love" in Spanish made something warm unfurled in his chest. Elena had seamlessly woven herself into their routine, bringing light to corners of their home he hadn't realized were dark. But it was the quiet moments that undid him completely. Like when he found her crying softly over a photo she'd accidentally dropped from her purse, a picture of a young man with her same gentle eyes. "My brother Miguel," she whispered when he asked. "He would have been 25 last month." Marcus sat beside her on the kitchen floor where she'd collapsed, offering silent comfort as she explained. Miguel had been sick for years, needing expensive treatments their family couldn't afford. She'd taken the job with his family hoping to save enough, but by the time she'd earned what they needed, it was too late. "I keep thinking if I'd worked more hours, taken night shifts somewhere else." Her voice broke. "Elena, look at me." He tilted her chin up. "You cannot carry that guilt. You did everything you could." That night, he lay awake thinking about the woman who'd sacrificed everything for her family, who still sent most of her earnings home to her parents, who gave Sophie more love and attention than some mothers gave their own children. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He was falling in love with his housekeeper. The timing couldn't have been worse. His company was in the middle of the biggest acquisition of his career, requiring 18-hour days and constant travel. Elena kept his home running smoothly, kept Sophie happy and cared for. But every departure felt like leaving part of himself behind. During a particularly grueling week in Chicago, he called home 3 times a day, just to hear Elena's voice reassuring him that everything was fine. Sophie ate all her vegetables, she'd report. She's practicing piano. No, don't worry, she remembered her homework. And you? He'd ask. How are you? A pause. I miss you. We both do. Those words sustained him through conference rooms and contract negotiations. But it was the photo Elena texted him, Sophie asleep on the couch with her head in Elena's lap, both of them surrounded by the mess of a blanket fort, that nearly broke his professional composure during a board meeting. He was booking a flight home early when his assistant knocked. "Mr. Blackwood, there's a woman here to see you. Says it's about your daughter's caregiver." The woman who entered his office was elegant, cold, with calculating eyes that immediately set him on edge. She introduced herself as Victoria Henley, a representative from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. "We've received reports about Elena Vasquez," she said without preamble, "concerns about her immigration status." Marcus's blood went cold. What kind of concerns? The anonymous tip suggested she might be working without proper documentation. We'll need to investigate. "That's impossible. I verified her status when I hired her." But even as he said it, doubt crept in. Had he been thorough enough? He'd been so desperate for help with Sophie, so impressed by Elena's references. "Nevertheless, Mr. Blackwood, we'll need to speak with her. And until this is resolved, she cannot continue working in your home." The flight back to Denver felt endless. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities, contingencies, the legal ramifications. But underneath the practical concerns was pure terror at the thought of losing Elena. He found her in the kitchen, helping Sophie with math homework. The scene was so normal, so precious, that he had to grip the doorframe to steady himself. "Marcus?" Elena looked up, immediately sensing something was wrong. What happened? Sophie ran to him, chattering about her day, but his eyes stayed locked on Elena's face. How could he tell her? How could he explain that someone had potentially destroyed their world with an anonymous phone call? That evening, after Sophie was asleep, he told Elena everything. Watched the color drain from her face, saw her hands begin to shake. "My visa," she whispered. "It expires next month. I was going to tell you. I was trying to find a way to renew it, but the lawyer said without a sponsor." "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" The question came out harsher than he intended. "Because I knew you would worry. Because I thought I could fix it myself." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Because I was afraid you'd send me away." Marcus pulled her into his arms, feeling her heart racing against his chest. "I would never send you away. Never." But even as he said it, they both knew it might not be his choice. The next morning brought ICE agents to his door. Marcus watched helplessly as they questioned Elena, demanded documentation, treated the woman he loved like a criminal. Sophie cried, clinging to Elena's legs, not understanding why strangers were making her friend upset. 48 hours, the lead agent told Marcus. "She has 48 hours to prove her status, or she'll be detained pending deportation proceedings." After they left, the house felt hollow. Elena sat at the kitchen table, staring at her hands. "I have to go," she said quietly. "No." Marcus's voice was steel. "We'll fight this. I'll hire the best immigration lawyers in the country." "With what grounds? I have no family here, no permanent job offer." She looked up at him with devastated eyes. "Marcus, I have to face reality. The reality is that Sophie needs you. I need you. You need a nanny. You can find another." He knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. "Elena, listen to me. What I feel for you, this isn't about convenience or childcare. I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Elena's eyes widened, tears flowing freely now. "You cannot love me," she whispered. "I'm nobody. I clean houses and take care of other people's children." "You're everything," he said fiercely. "You brought life back into this house. You made Sophie smile again after her mother left. You made me remember what happiness feels like." Elena pulled her hands away, standing abruptly. "Stop, please. This only makes it harder." "Then marry me." The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Elena froze, her back to him. "Marry me," he repeated, standing. "We'll solve the visa problem and—" "No!" She spun around, anger flashing in her eyes. "I will not be your charity case. I will not marry someone because they feel sorry for me. That's not, isn't it? 3 days ago, we were employer and employee. Now suddenly you love me? Now suddenly marriage is the solution?" Her voice cracked. "I have more pride than that, Marcus." She was right, and they both knew it. The timing was suspicious, the proposal reeking of desperation rather than romance. But Marcus's feelings were real, had been building for months, and now he was watching everything slip away. "Elena, please, let me help you." "No," she wiped her eyes, composing herself with visible effort. "I've made my decision. I'm leaving tonight." "What about Sophie? You can't just disappear from her life." Elena's composure cracked. "Do you think this is easy for me? She's like my own daughter. But staying will only make the inevitable worse for all of us." That afternoon, Marcus watched Elena pack her few belongings, while Sophie sobbed, begging her not to go. The sight nearly brought him to his knees. "I'll write to you," Elena promised Sophie, "and you must be brave for your papa, okay?" "But I don't want you to leave," Sophie wailed. "Why can't you stay? Daddy has lots of money." Elena's eyes met Marcus's over Sophie's head. The pain there was unbearable. As the taxi pulled away that evening, Marcus stood in his driveway with Sophie in his arms, both of them crying. The house behind them felt like a mausoleum. But as the taillights disappeared into the darkness, Marcus made a decision. He wasn't giving up. Not on Elena, not on what they'd built together, not on the family they could become. He just had to figure out how to fight for someone who was too proud to let him save her. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway of his study, Elena's letter trembling in his hands. The words blurred through his tears as the truth crashed over him like a tidal wave. She hadn't abandoned him. She'd been protecting him, carrying the unbearable weight of a terminal diagnosis alone. "Dad?" Sophie's voice cut through his shock. She appeared beside him, her face pale but determined. "I heard everything. We need to find her." Marcus looked at his daughter, seeing Elena's strength reflected in her eyes. "Sophie, No excuses," Sophie interrupted, grabbing his jacket from the chair. 3 years, Dad. 3 years we've been miserable without her. If she's still alive, if there's even a chance." Marcus's phone buzzed. Dr. Morrison's name flashed on the screen. With shaking hands, he answered. "Marcus, I'm sorry to call so late, but I've been thinking about Elena Martinez. You mentioned she was your former housekeeper?" "Yes, why?" "There's something I should have told you years ago. She came to see me after her diagnosis. She begged me not to contact you, said she didn't want to burden your family. But Marcus, the treatment she refused, it's had remarkable success rates. If she reconsidered..." Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. Where would she have gone for treatment? "St. Catherine's Medical Center downtown. Dr. Sarah Chen runs their oncology program." The line went quiet, except for Marcus's ragged breathing. Hopeful, Sophie grabbed his arm, her eyes bright with hope and tears. Thank you, Marcus whispered into the phone, then turned to Sophie. Get in the car. The drive through the city felt eternal. Rain pelted the windshield as Marcus navigated the late-night traffic, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Sophie sat beside him, clutching Elena's letter. What if we're too late? She whispered. We're not, Marcus said firmly, though doubt gnawed at his heart. We can't be. St. Catherine's Medical Center rose before them like a beacon. Marcus parked haphazardly, and they rushed through the sliding doors into the fluorescent-lit lobby. I need to speak with Dr. Sarah Chen, Marcus told the night receptionist. I'm sorry, sir, but it's nearly midnight. I'm sorry, sir, but it's nearly midnight, unless this is a medical emergency. It is. Sophie stepped forward, her voice steady despite her tears. We're looking for someone who might be a patient here. Elena Martinez, please. The receptionist studied their faces, something in their desperation moving her. Let me call Dr. Chen. She's still in the building. Minutes stretched like hours until a petite woman in scrubs appeared, her dark hair pulled back, exhaustion etched in her features. I'm Dr. Chen. She's asking about Elena Martinez? Yes, Marcus stepped forward. I'm Marcus Thompson. Elena worked for my family. We just discovered she's been sick. Dr. Chen's expression softened with recognition. Mr. Thompson, Elena spoke of you often. She's been my patient for 2 years now. Is she? Fearful, Sophie couldn't finish the question. She's alive, Dr. Chen said gently, and both Marcus and Sophie sagged with relief. The treatment has been successful, but it's been difficult. She's been staying in our extended care facility during recovery. Can we see her? Marcus asked, his voice breaking. Dr. Chen hesitated. She made it very clear she didn't want contact with your family. She said it would be too painful. Please, Sophie whispered. She doesn't know that we know the truth. She doesn't know how much we've missed her. Something in Sophie's plea touched the doctor. She glanced between them, then nodded slowly. Room 314. But if she asks you to leave, we'll respect her wishes, Marcus promised, though his heart screamed otherwise. The elevator ride felt like ascending into another world. Room 314 sat at the end of a quiet hallway, soft light spilling from beneath the door. Marcus raised his hand to knock, then froze. What if she doesn't want to see us? He whispered. Sophie took his hand. Then we'll tell her we love her anyway. Marcus knocked gently. A soft voice called, Come in. The door opened to reveal Elena sitting by the window, bathed in moonlight. She was thinner than Marcus remembered, her beautiful hair shorter, but her eyes, those warm, compassionate eyes, were unchanged. When she saw them, her face went white with shock. Marcus? Sophie? How did you? She stood unsteadily, gripping the windsill. We found your letter, Sophie said, crossing the room in 2 quick steps. Elena, why didn't you tell us? Elena's composure crumbled. I couldn't. You had already lost so much. I couldn't burden you with... Burden us? Marcus stepped closer, his voice thick with emotion. Elena, don't you understand? Losing you was the burden. These 3 years without you have been hell. Tears streamed down Elena's face. But the treatment was expensive, uncertain. You needed to move on, find someone healthy, someone who could... Someone who could what? Marcus interrupted, closing the distance between them. Love Sophie like you did? Love me like you did? Elena, there is no one else. There never was. Elena shook her head, backing toward the window. Marcus, you don't understand. I'm not the same person. The treatments, the surgeries. I'm broken. You're not broken. Sophie said fiercely, moving to Elena's other side. "You're the strongest person I know. Do you have any idea what you mean to us?" Elena looked between them, confusion and hope warring in her expression. "But I thought you'd moved on. I thought—" "You thought wrong," Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and glittering. Elena gasped. It was the engagement ring he'd bought 3 years ago, the one he'd never had the chance to give her. "I bought this the day before you left," Marcus said, dropping to one knee beside her chair. "I've carried it every day since, hoping, praying I'd get the chance to ask you properly." Elena's hands flew to her mouth, fresh tears flowing. "Marcus, no, you can't." "Elena Martinez," Marcus continued, his voice strong despite his tears. "Will you marry me? Not despite your struggles, but because of who you are. The woman who taught my daughter to be brave, who brought love back into our home, who sacrificed everything to protect us from pain." Sophie knelt beside her father, taking Elena's free hand. "Please, Elena, we're not complete without you. We never were." Elena looked at the ring, then at Marcus's face, then at Sophie's hopeful expression. "But what if the cancer comes back? What if I can't have more children? What if?" "Then we'll face it together," Marcus said simply. "Elena, I've spent 3 years learning that love isn't about guarantees. It's about choosing each other every day, whatever comes." Elena's resistance finally crumbled. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "Both of you. Every day I wanted to call, to come home, but I was so scared." "You're home now," Sophie said, wrapping her arms around Elena. "You're home." Elena looked at Marcus, love and fear and hope swirling in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled both Elena and Sophie into his embrace. They held each other in the moonlit room. Years of separation and pain dissolving into tears of joy and relief. 6 months later, Elena stood in the garden of the Thompson estate, surrounded by flowers she had planted during her recovery. Her hair had grown back thicker and darker, and color had returned to her cheeks. She wore a simple white dress that Sophie had helped her choose, her engagement ring catching the afternoon sunlight. Dr. Morrison officiated the small ceremony, grinning as he pronounced them husband and wife. Sophie, now 18 and preparing for college, served as maid of honor, her eyes bright with tears of happiness. "You may kiss your bride," Dr. Morrison announced. As Marcus and Elena's lips met, Sophie cheered and scattered rose petals filled the air. When they broke apart, Elena whispered, "Not today," and smiled at her own words. Marcus laughed, understanding flooding his face. "Not today what?" "Happy." "Not today will I let fear keep me from love," Elena said, her voice strong and sure. "Never again." As their guests celebrated around them, the 3 of them, Marcus, Elena, and Sophie, stood together in their garden, whole at last. The whispered words that had once meant goodbye now meant the opposite. Not today would they give up on each other. Not today would they let love slip away. They were home.